Is this an adventure or what? We don't need unexplained phenomena. I hope you guys are enjoying this journey we're taking you on. I know you come expecting to hear about big cats, cryptids, UFOs. We will touch on some of that, but I think it's worth sharing some of this with you, don't you? There's only 2 living souls up here today.
Because I can see it in my mind, I can see it in my head what I saw, but I can't describe.
Our eyes was closed, like a brightish light in my face, and I just felt paralysed.
Someone said there's something out there, so we had a look. It looked like a walnut. That's the only way I can describe it.
It was like it had loads of tiny little windows all over it, and it had lights in those windows, but not a light that illuminates.
Anyway, we were ushered into this lounge. This fella come in and said, whatever you saw was a weather effect.
And everything is deathly silent. There's no sea, there's no wind, there's no night noise, because, you know, there's foxes all over here. There's nothing.
Nothing. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Truth Proof live stream on a Sunday. I hope you've all had a great weekend and looking forward to a week ahead. Looks like we're going to have a bit of rain here, so that's good. I think everybody will be sighing with relief. But got a great guest tonight. I will be talking to Dr. Peter McCue, researcher and author whose fascinating work has taken him with his research along haunted roads into zones of strangeness and mysterious encounters. And these are the books that he's produced, which are Zones of Strangeness, Paranormal Encounters on Britain's Roads, and Britain's Paranormal Forests, which he's going to tell us about tonight, as well as his thoughts on unexplained phenomena, which is going to be fascinating. I'm not sure if Peter's been on once or twice before, but it's always great speaking with him. But before we bring Peter on, which we're going to do shortly, let's just have a look who's in chat, because I can see we've got well over 200 people here already. So we've got Karen Behrman. Gemma's doing the moderating. Thanks, Gemma. We've got Jess, my other daughter, in. Jessica Pym. Moderator. It's like a family thing, this. Didn't expect to see you there. Wendy Jones, Zero Dawn, Disabled Welshman. You know, I can't do all these names, people. It's like playing bingo with names. Ian, what is that? Dave Barker, good to see you, Dave. Davos McPortpie. I don't want many long names like that. And Andrew Wild, Christopher. Let's have a look. Purple Pitkin. I think Linny's in. Mia Girl. Mrs. Linny, maybe. I don't know. But we're going to... Oh, Doc Martin's in. Good to see you, Martin. And great to speak earlier today. So without further ado, let's bring Peter in and let's introduce him and see where we're going. Peter, welcome.
Hello.
How are you doing? It's been a while since you were on here, isn't it?
It has, yes.
So what's been happening in between times? Have you been busy researching and working on another book or another 2 books, maybe?
I've been working on articles, but I haven't been working on another book just recently, no.
Okay. So, and have your views over the years changed regarding the nature of unexplained phenomena?
Fundamentally, I'd say not over recent years, at least. My views are fairly broad anyway, and I'm fairly accepting of paranormal phenomena. Cautious, yeah. Of course, in individual cases. But as I'll be explaining, I think when you're asking me, I do think a lot of paranormal research goes in the wrong direction and is founded on wrong suppositions.
Yeah.
Particularly the traditional sort of spirit theory, which seems to dominate discussions of the paranormal, where I think that in many cases the evidence that paranormal activity is due to spirits of the dead isn't very good.
Do you think that's just the nature of, and no disrespect to people who call themselves this, but the nature of people who go ghost hunting and everything's spirit?
Yes. Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, in these ghost hunting, self-called named ghost hunting groups, there's usually a fixed model. You know, they'll go along. Sensations and subjective impressions will be given a high level of credibility. Maybe a few readings with a magnetometer or something might be taken into account, and then of course the mystic Meg comments by the team medium will be given high credence, and maybe there'll be an attempt to ask the ghost to move on. Now, I'm not saying that no cases of haunting or whatever don't involve the dead, but I think many of them don't. In fact, I'll be citing one or two cases at least that don't fit well with that. One problem with this is that if you look at apparitions, for instance, often there are too many types of apparition in one particular location, which makes it most unlikely that these are discarnate spirits, earthbound spirits. I don't know if you want me to go into it now, but
well, I can see questions already, but just give us a few examples, or go into that a little bit, please.
Well, I've recently, maybe a year or so ago, I got to hear about a case in Edinburgh, and I'll very briefly give you a bit of background. A woman called Antra left school at 16. She was born in Midlothian, and she entered the finance industry in junior positions. But she worked her way up quite quickly, I think, to very senior positions. And in 1996, she started having a series of apparent precognitive experiences related to the impending Dunblane school massacre. This was when a man entered a primary school in Dunblane, Scotland, and murdered quite a few people, pupils, I think one or two teachers, and then took his own life. And she, when the incident occurred, she berated herself, thinking that she should have done something more to prevent it. I don't think she could have done anything. I think the information she had from her impressions wouldn't have been very useful to the police. They wouldn't have been able to identify the site and the people involved. But she then discussed the matter with Professor Archie Roy, who was an astronomer with a strong interest in psychical research. And she became involved in the Scottish Society for Psychical Research, and she also was involved with spiritualist organisations. She formed a group, a spiritualist group that met regularly, and she came to believe that the group was being influenced by the spirit of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was the author of the Sherlock Holmes story. And she believed that Doyle wanted the group, her colleagues, to find a location, a building, to turn into a spiritual centre, and that it should be named in honour of him. And eventually she did come across a building, brought to her attention a large corner house in the West End of Edinburgh, and she thought it had great potential. And the Spiritualist National Union bought the building, and eventually bought the building, and renovations were made, and it became what's known as the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Centre. And Andrew Traherne wrote a couple of books about these events. One of them, the second one, was called The Vortex, and it detailed lots of strange things that had happened at the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Centre, particularly around the time of the renovations. I first got to hear about the case from a book by Andy Thomas, an English author who was visiting the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Centre to give a lecture, and he was accommodated in a flat there, a self-contained flat. He was with his wife, and they had a quite disturbed night with typical, I say typical, what you might say a typical haunt phenomena, noises, sounds of shouting, furniture being pushed about, this sort of thing. And it was difficult for him and his wife to get to sleep. But they did eventually get some sleep, I think. And he mentioned this in his book, and that got me to contact Anne Traherne, and she drew my attention to her book, which is the second book. Well, the second book, as I said, of The Vortex, and it's packed with interesting testimony. Some examples. Types of apparition have reportedly been seen there. A man of Victorian appearance, a wee lassie, a young girl, girls in night dresses, and even figures that looked like Roman legionnaires marching up and down the main stairs in the assault.
But that's not kind of, it's not fitting for that building, is it? Really, legionnaires?
Completely non-fitting. No, I mean the building was constructed in, I think, about 1861. The Romans weren't occupying that building.
Oh,
And so the idea that these apparitions are all sort of spirits of the dead, I think, is highly unlikely. In fact, I think my own view, and I like to sort of think out of the box a bit, is that the sighting of the man who saw the legionnaires was actually Anne Traherne's husband, Ian. And a conjecture of mine is that what may have happened is that he didn't actually see any soldiers at all. What happened was that a false memory was projected into his mind, so that when Anne arrived at the building and he told her that for hours he'd been seeing these legionnaires, what had actually happened was that his memory had been warped by an outside intelligence, perhaps, and that what he was reporting was sincere, but not a perceptual experience, but a memory experience, a memory alteration. In fact, I think that explanation accounts better than time travel for time slips. Imagine that you report that you were walking along the cliffs at Bempton and suddenly the scenery reverted to that of the 16th century, and you saw people walking past with old carts and that sort of thing. The sort of literal interpretation that many people would place on that is that you've gone back in time. But I think this idea that people go back in time with time slips is unlikely. And in fact, if you look at cases such as that one in Edinburgh, which I haven't finished with, I'll go back to it in a moment, but if you look at cases like that, there are little things that can suggest that it's not genuine time travel. For instance, the author Jenny Randalls wrote an account in a book, a compilation of stories about time travel and time slips and so on. And it concerned two couples from England who went on holiday to the continent, and they were going to northern Spain, and they got on the ferry across to France, traveled through France. And in the course of their journey, they were looking for accommodation, and they wound up in I'll cut the story a little bit short, but they wound up in a very old-fashioned looking hotel. It didn't seem to have glass windows, and there didn't seem to be any lift or modern accoutrement, So and then when they went to pay the bill, it was incredibly cheap, just a few francs, and they saw some gendarmes and that seemed to be dressed in very old-fashioned clothes. And while they were there, the men, I think both men tried to take some photos. But anyway, as Jenny Randalls points out in this account, it's strange that the hotelier accepted their currency, modern day currency, when this was a scene maybe relating to the 19th century or something like that, or certainly decades earlier. It's also strange that the hotelier wasn't surprised by their clothing and their futuristic vehicle.
So they're having some kind of episode, and everything, do you think, is quite normal?
Well, what I think probably happened, and this is just conjecture, is that they actually stayed in an ordinary place that night, but their memory was warped, and they believed that they'd actually stayed in this old-fashioned place. And the real memory of where they had stayed, somewhere quite normal, had been suppressed. It may sound hard to believe this, but I'll give a clinical example from when I was working as a psychologist. I won't go into too much detail, obviously, for confidentiality reasons and so on. But years ago, I saw a woman whose fiance had been killed or fatally injured in an accident. But this woman at the time, she seemed to go into denial, and she convinced herself that he was still alive. and was slowly recovering in a city hospital, and that she was visiting him regularly. And these visits would span quite a time. And then one day she mentioned the living boyfriend to someone who knew the true facts, and he said something like, "Mary, he's dead," and this sort of came as a shock to her. And her illusion that this man was still alive.
So had she constructed this world?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Unconsciously, she constructed this. Well, really unconsciously, she constructed this belief that she was visiting him in a hospital, and that he was still alive. Now that would be called in psychiatric terminology an episode of dissociative amnesia. But it just shows that, I mean, it's an unusual case, and it's not necessarily anything paranormal about that case, but it does give credibility to the notion that these sort of memories of having been in the past may actually be false memories. So but perhaps with a paranormal aspect.
Well, yeah, but so we jump back to the paranormal aspect then, and you're talking when you were telling us before the story about the building, the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle spiritual. What
Centre, the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Centre.
The Arthur Conan Doyle Centre. So yeah. I asked, from my listening to this, it weren't haunted, or no suggestion it was haunted before these people occupied it.
Well, I don't think we really know. It had last operated in a sort of business sense as a rundown backpackers hostel. But then the bank had foreclosed on them or something because I presume they hadn't paid rent or something. I don't know why, but for some time, I don't know how long, it hadn't been in use. So, or not sort of normal business use. So if it had been haunted prior to the acquisition by the Spiritualist National Union, we may not know the details.
No,
but the apparitions were just part of this show.
But just before we, I know you want to move on to. I know you've got a few things you want to talk about, but I just want to establish, and I think people in chat will as well. So, are we saying then that a lot of these sightings, these apparitions, could be constructions within our own minds, or are you saying there is an outside paranormal influence that's creating them?
I'm accepting that there could be an outside paranormal influence, and as far as apparitions are concerned, I suspect that some of them are genuine sensory experiences. People see something and it's puzzling and it's anomalous, but they do see something. But in other cases, when people see an apparition, and then they report the apparition, what they're reporting is a false memory. I'll give you another example. Take what I call colliding apparitions. These are cases where someone's driving along and they seemingly notice a person running out into the road in front of their vehicle. They seem to strike the person. Then maybe the figure disappears beneath the car. The driver stops, is horrified, checks, looks under the car and can't find any sign of anyone. Now, when people have or supposedly have these experiences, it's basically a three-stage process. First of all, they see the event. Second, they remember the event. And then three, they report the event. And the assumption often is, in books on ghosts and so on, is that this event is genuinely sensory. Something is seen. Yeah. You might debate what it is, but something is seen and it's reported. But what I'm suggesting is that what may happen with some of these colliding apparition cases is that the person is driving along, maybe thinking about a holiday they have going on, and then a false but convincing memory is injected into their mind. They've just knocked down an old lady, for instance. Horrified, they check, they can't find the old lady. They then report the matter, say, to the police. So what I'm saying is that in instances like that, there may have been no apparitional experience. It's
You-
just a
you-
distortion of memory. Well, I say just. That's minimizing it. I don't mean to minimize it. It could be as paranormal as an actual sensory ghost.
Yeah, because what you said it was an air of certainty. What they're seeing is a false memory, or what they're seeing is a false memory. I'm not saying you're wrong. You've looked into this, but how can you be so sure?
Sure.
No,
I'm not sure. This is
you
conjecture.
said it with an air of certainty. Do you see what they're seeing is a false memory?
Yes, no. What that's just the conjecture. That if you're driving along and then your mind is taken over by this apparent memory of a sensory event, of seeing something happen, and you're convinced that happened, you're sure. Well, I just remember I knocked someone down. But actually, what's happened is something has fiddled with your mind in a sense, and inserted that memory that you believe, and you then report it to the police or someone else. And in fact, there wasn't such an event.
No, but you've convinced there were. Yeah, I get it. I've got a question, Peter, and I'm good. If you've no objection, we'll put them up as I see them. Otherwise, there'll just be a backlog of them. It's from Tony Worrell. And it's for Peter. I have Peter's road ghost book. What is his favourite road ghost sighting, and what does he think of the famous A3 Burpham case?
Yeah, I presume it is. Yes. Someone criticised me, not harshly. He said that he found the Burpham case particularly interesting, but it was disappointed. What was the effect that I hadn't gone into it in greater detail. But as for the question, what's my favourite case? I don't think I've got one, to be honest. I can't think of one. The cases in the book cover different categories, such as road ghost type phenomena of this type I've just been talking about. UFO experiences involving missing time. And also phantom vehicles, and black dogs, and alien big cats. So it's covering quite a wide range of cases. So it's difficult to know how to compare them, really, because one story, if it's true, is one that's nice, but I don't know whether it's true. It's based on. It's not based on first-hand evidence that in relation to me. I wasn't given the evidence. I'm quoting someone else, but it was a woman who was, I think it was in Essex, in North Essex, and she was walking home, and she passed some labourers or some men, and she heard them mutter something about what they'd like to do to her, and the implication was some sort of sexual assault, or maybe something unpleasant like that. But a large dog had appeared around that time and was following her. And the men, in referring to what they wanted to do, they said, if it hadn't been for the dog.
Oh,
so then when she left that scene and got home or something, I think she thought the dog was still with her or something, or maybe hoped it was, and was going to show it to, I don't know whether it was a husband or someone else, but it had gone by then. Now, if we assume that it was that it wasn't just a chance event involving a real dog, it could be that that dog was materialized or was hallucinated.
Kind of guardian, or
a guardian, yes.
Yeah. I see, yeah.
Now that would be a nice story to believe if it was solidly reported, solid testimony, with backup and so on. Quite a few of the people I did give me first-hand testimony.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've got another question here, and if you want to carry on, we will, but let's just deal with this one if that's possible. From Julio. Peter, have you ever investigated a case that you were sure could be easily explained, but then discovered it was a genuine mystery?
No, not that I can remember. Not that I can remember. I must say that probably the majority of the cases I've personally investigated have been disappointing. But you get to expect that, you know.
Absolutely. You know, we're all waiting for. I love it, to be honest with you. When I put a little film on about a certain location, and I answer as many comments as I can, you know, after the film's gone on, you thank people for the comments, and if they don't believe it, you know, as long as they're not abusive, so thanks for your comment. But I love it when I get somebody who comments and they go, I were in that location 2 years ago, and this happened to me, or this strange thing happened to me. And if you can get to speak to them, it doesn't mean that everybody's telling truth, but to me, it's just packing a little bit more substance around the location and the person's first step forward to talk about it. And I like that, you know. But yeah. So, Peter, before we do another question, I mean, could you mention any cases that aren't easily explained in terms of traditional spirit theory?
Well, I'll just finish off on the Edinburgh one.
Okay, yeah, go on then.
As well as the sounds of footsteps, banging doors, and that sort of thing, objects displaced. Some painters were doing some work. This was during the time of the renovations at the building, and there was an older man and a younger painter, possibly an apprentice, I don't know. And they started arguing because they arrived and their paint brushes had disappeared, I think, and maybe one or two other things I can't remember now. But these items were actually found elsewhere in the building after a search, but not an area that they'd been contracted to do any work in. So this sort of thing happened. At another point, Ian Traherne had moved some items because he was going to do a painting job. And moving these items took quite a long time, about maybe an hour or something, I don't know. And then when he finished, they were all back where they'd started from. This is a sort of tricksterish phenomenon.
I was just going to say, it's trickery, isn't it? It's a trickster element to it.
Trickster element, yes, which you sometimes get with haunting cases or poltergeist cases. I remember a case I investigated in Scotland where a man, with various things were going on, but a man had a metal container in his living room, and it contained 3 20-pound notes. And one morning he decided he wanted the money, so he went to the container for the money, and it was empty. And he was rather disconcerted by that. But when he returned to his house at lunchtime, there were 3 new-looking, uncreased 20-pound notes lying on the coffee table. And it was as if it was a sort of taking the mickey out of him, really. Or, yeah.
You know, well, when you talked about the paintbrushes, you can almost imagine that somebody could have just moved them to a different part of the building. You know, as you were saying that, I'm thinking that's not supposed to be anything strangely paranormal at all. But then the guy spends a great deal of time moving a lot of materials to come back and find them in the same place.
Yeah.
But then you think, how does that work? How does the physical? How do they move the physical when there's no substance?
Well, that's right. Yes, it's easy. One might say, oh, well, it's mischievous spirit or something like that. But how does a mischievous spirit, which is an immaterial thing, move a piece of matter, you know, through walls or to another bit, you know, part of the building and so on? I mean, another occasion with the painters, it wasn't just paintbrushes that were moved. A-frame ladders, or 1 or 2, I think, A-frame ladders were moved, and they were stuffed into a room. And it was difficult for them, assisted by the Trahernes, to get the items out. So it's most unlikely that one person, you know, the young painter, had carried out that bit of trickery. Sense of presence, which is, of course, a common one, and also physical attack. On 3 occasions, Ian Traherne experienced what he thought regarded as an attack. He was thrown over some chairs at one point, and someone else witnessed this. So that's just some of the, well, not all of them.
And this is in the Arthur Conan Doyle building.
The Conan Doyle, and I find it hard to explain all these various phenomena in terms of discarnate spirits.
So have you come up with any alternative theories as to what could be responsible, assuming it's not humans playing tricks and acting about.
Yeah.
Let's just...
Well, yeah. Well, where it's not where we can dismiss or physical factors such as magnetic fields and so on, infrasound. One conjecture, and this is vague, I accept this, but is that they're the orchestrations of a tricksterish intelligence. It's maybe making its presence felt in some way. Whether the intelligence is malign or benign, it might vary actually with cases.
Well, you've just mentioned physical attacks. If it's
That's right. That's right. So, I think that I think also, as I've said before, that in looking at cases, I think some cases, if we think outside the box, we can see the possibility that phenomena might be orchestrated to give people a fright, and it could be well intended. I'll give you.
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Yes. I don't want to embarrass you, but I'm going to cite a couple of cases of your own.
Do it.
There's one that you reported in Truth Proof 4 about a person called Nigel Briggs, who with 3 friends went to Danes Dyke. Now, for people who don't know, Danes Dyke is a sort of embankment. It runs across the peninsula that ends at Flamborough Head, and it goes from the south to the north. And along the length of the dyke, it's wooded all the way except for a very short section at the northern end. And Neil Briggs and his friends lit a fire. They were somewhere near a golf course. I think they probably more towards the southern end of the dyke.
Yeah.
But, they lit a fire, and around that time they got the feeling that someone was watching them, that they couldn't actually see much in the dark. Eventually, Briggs approached the figure, getting to about 6 to 7 feet away, and he was carrying with him a
shovel.
A shovel, yeah. And the entity said nothing, and seemed seemed to be over 7 feet in height, 7 feet or more in height, and didn't say anything. And Briggs couldn't make out facial features, as I recall, but he thought that the entity didn't seem to have any clothes, and he started getting scared. And then he retreated and joined his friends, who also were apprehensive, and they left. And on the way out, Briggs looked back and saw this entity, whatever it was, jump down off the dyke into the ditch on the west side of it. And he commented to you that normally if someone jumping that distance, an ordinary human would have been injured.
Probably fatally, to be honest,
Possibly, yes. Well, my conjecture is that this manifestation may have been orchestrated by some sort of intelligence because what these chaps were doing was inimical to the environment, was potentially dangerous. The fire risk at the. I'm saying here this isn't a case of where the phenomena were benefited for their personal, were orchestrated for their personal benefit, but for environmental protection reasons. But I'll come on to the other type of case very shortly. But so that's a case where if you posit that there's some sort of intelligence behind the phenomena, but not necessarily discarnate human, it could have a good intention. And even though it frightened these chaps away,
the intention was good.
It was for the overall good. Another case which fits with that model, I mean, it's open to alternative interpretations, is one involving a witness called Jason Jones. And I'll actually read from something I've written about this rather than try and paraphrase it, because I might forget an important detail. This account was given to you by the informant you call Jason Jones, who was from Sheffield but had emigrated to Australia in 2002. The events in question had allegedly occurred some 30 years previously in 1987, when Jones was 18 He and two older friends, Scott and Mark, were camping at night in Warncliffe Woods, Sheffield, and they weren't using tents. They lit a fire and eventually drifted off to sleep. Jason awoke around 2 a.m. feeling that something wasn't right. This was followed by an overwhelming sense of fear. He heard a twig snap. Very soon after, all hell broke loose, with trees and branches cracking and breaking everywhere. I should say, just in passing, that it's not clear from Jason's account whether these sounds were matched by actual physical damage to the trees.
I looked into that afterwards.
All right.
From what I can gather, there were no signs. I did ask that because I thought
right.
there's some kind of voice projection.
Yeah.
I've had lots of conversations with, call him Jason. It's not changed his name. Lots of conversations via the internet over years, and that was something I didn't highlight in the book. You're right. So
yes,
no signs of damage.
Well, thanks for clearing that up. That doesn't invalidate it, of course, because in many sort of classic haunting cases, you might get sounds of furniture moving, and then when people go and check in the room, nothing's out of place. So that's consistent with other cases. Then Jason heard Scott screaming. He was suspended upside down, 2 or 3 feet above the ground, being held by a creature. All Jason could see of it was a big black fur-covered arm reaching down. At the time, he assumed that Scott was being held by the ankle, although it transpired that he was being held by one of his calves. Suddenly, the creature released Scott and ran off, and the men hearing the breaking of trees and plants. As the creature seemed to get further away, there was a sound like a gunshot or a tree exploding. It was followed by silence. Now, according to Jason's account, Scott was so traumatized by this experience that he wanted to run away, but Jason and Mark restrained him. For his part, Jason feared that if they tried to leave while it was still dark, they would have got lost. They built up the fire and kept it going all night while they waited for daylight, the implication being that they thought that the fire would afford some protection. But they reportedly experienced a succession of further attacks similar to the first, although no one was lifted into the air and no creature was seen. Between each episode, there was Jason inferred that, during the second attack, Jason inferred that 2 creatures were involved because he could hear movement from more than one direction. Mm-hmm. As noted, sounds were reportedly heard suggestive. I won't go into that because we've dealt with that. I found no other reports of people having such experiences in Warncliffe Woods.
No, there are reports though. Are you reading from the book still?
Not the book. No. That was from my own notes. Yes,
that's from your own book, interpreted on.
Not my. I don't know that this is in my own book. It might be actually, but
I have had other reports from Warncliffe, but about strange activity, unexplained phenomena, but not same as was Jason's.
Okay, we're running into a problem now though, because in the autumn of 2022, a documentary titled "Elusive: Bigfoot Abroad" was screened in the UK, or at least in Scotland, where I live, by Blaze, a Freeview station channel. It ran for 2 hours and 25 minutes, although some of that was taken up with commercial breaks. Towards the end, there was an audio clip lasting about 2 minutes in which Jason discussed his 1987 experience with you. But what he said differed in some significant respects from his account in your book. First of all, according to the documentary, he was in the wood with 3 friends.
Yeah, do you know, as you were saying that, because I've spoke to him over the years, I'm thinking to myself, I'm sure he were in with 3. I were actually thinking that. And what else is interesting is Elusive. I'm actually in that documentary.
Yes.
Talking about the Flixton werewolf.
Yes.
And I'll be honest with you, I'd got no knowledge that story was in it.
Yes.
Seriously.
Right.
And they wouldn't have spoken to him, even though I believe that what you're saying. So they must have extracted. It must have been extracted from what I've done. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. From what I remember, it was an audio interview with Jason. There was a picture of someone who was presumably Jason.
I see.
He wasn't talking. He wasn't moving. He was talking to you, and it was quite brief. That's whereas his account in the book refers to a series of attacks occurring at intervals throughout the night. He mentioned only one in the documentary, that during which one of his companions was lifted into the air. And although his wording wasn't entirely consistent, he stated in the documentary that both of the victims' calves incurred bruising.
Okay.
Jason's wording seemed to suggest that the person who was panicking and wanted to run away wasn't Scott, but one of the others. So there's a little bit of discrepancy. I mean, one way of looking at this is that if Jason was being interviewed for a recording and there was a limited amount of time, he may have felt he had to kind of go over certain points quickly and miss out bits, hence not missing the recurrent attacks.
It's interesting. I, as you were saying it, and he went into the woods with two friends, which is what I've obviously written in the Truth Proof book. I realised speaking to him afterwards, and I don't think Jason's been trying to be deceitful.
Yes.
But there were three friends, and I was thinking that. I thought, blooming heck, I don't remember two friends, but yeah, there were three.
Yes.
And the interview, no one else would have interviewed him. So it's got the interview has got to have come from myself.
Yes.
Without a doubt, because I don't mean always. I've got sole or exclusivity on this person. I just know that he's not spoke to nobody else about it.
Yes.
So that's interesting. So
no, go on. I was just going to say that if we accept that, notwithstanding the discrepancy between Jason's two versions, that this case could be interpreted in terms of guardianship. Again, let's say that what Jason and his friends were doing was actually a fire risk, and putting the wood at the threat, and there was some sort of intelligence that was keen to drive them away. And paradoxically, what they actually did, building up the fire and keeping it going, would have guaranteed perhaps more attacks, because
the flames of the attack can't pound upon you. You know, and I've said similar things myself, Peter, and I think some of our audience will know what I'm going to be saying here. So a group of people going into a woodland, not unlike Jason, having a drink, maybe even breaking bottles, leaving litter, lighting a fire, and I'm talking about it in relation to the Fae. Let's assume that there are elemental creatures, the Fae, and it's their home. And these things are allegedly supposed to be able to shapeshift and present as other things.
Yes.
What better way to drive somebody out of a woodland than to present as something as frightening and terrifying like that? So how do you explain then in that story, that account, the physicality? It left marks, it left bruises on the guys. So something happened that was physical.
Yes, well, that's right. Yes. I think it does sound that something physical happened. Just as an aside, I did discover by searching on the internet that there was a serious fire at Warncliffe Woods in the summer of 2022, although I don't know how it started. It was detected on the 14th of August that year, and with firefighting operations continuing the next day. So I wonder whether it was caused by someone maybe lighting a fire or something.
Well,
like that.
It could have been, but I suppose that all we can do is surmise on that. We've no idea. It could have been a bottle reflected in sunlight, couldn't it? That's just amplified the heat. Got another question here, Peter. Are we good for this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Christopher says, Peter, I saw an apparition of an old lady in country clothing, all dressed in tweed. She did not scare me because she looked solid like you and me. So we realised, Christopher, that there's quite a bit missing to your question. Did she just disappear? Because I'd be saying, how did you know she were an apparition? But I don't know. Any thoughts?
Obviously, I don't know. I mean, the possibilities, it could be a sensory experience. in other words, if other people had been there, they would have seen it as well. It could even be potentially caught on camera or something if it were a sensory experience. But on the other hand, it could be again one of these memory distortion issues. So I don't know.
Okay.
But,
Well, we have another question, but I take it you've got a bit more to add to that. Go on.
no, I think I've probably finished on that one now. Yes. So
Right,
yes.
let's try this. Peter, I worked with a chap that said he was was best friends with one of the couples that stayed in the hotel in France. He said they looked for the hotel on their return and there was no buildings I should have been inside.
That's quite right. I elided that because I didn't want to go into too much detail. But I wanted to deal with the central point. But you're absolutely right. That's what they say in the account. They looked for the building. There was also another oddity that when they were looking for the hotel in the first place, they called it another hotel, and there was a strangely dressed man there, and I think he told them that hotel was full, but he was able to direct them to this other hotel, which turned out to be the old-fashioned one. Now, when they came back and they couldn't find the hotel, they called at that newer hotel and for directions. And I think the person said he didn't know the hotel they were referring to, and he couldn't recall any member of staff who was wearing the clothing that had been worn, by the person previously. So yes, I accept that those elements are the story.
Do you have any other examples then of areas or things that have kind of been generated or orchestrated to scare people away?
Yes. There's another one here, which is an interesting one. This can be found on the internet. My primary source was a book by Paul Adams called Haunted Luton and Dunstable. And it concerns a small wood near Luton, near the southwestern end of Luton in Bedfordshire. And this wood is called Badgerdale Wood, or it's known locally apparently as Bluebell Wood, a small wood. But just before I say about what's happened, what events have happened in that wood, I should refer to an incident which may or may not be connected to this matter in the Badgerdale Wood. It goes back to March 1963, and it concerns vandalism and desecration at a church outside Clop Hill in Bedfordshire. Now, the location is just several miles as the crow flies north of Luton. And in 1963, I think a grave was dug up, and at least one body was interfered with, and I think bones or items were moved about, giving an impression of possible black magic, or that people were trying to create an impression of black magic as opposed to it being real black magic. Either way, it was pretty bad thing to do. So that was, and I think there may have been more than one incident. I did read about this case before, and my recollection, I'd have to go back to this to check, is that there may have been more problems than just one occasion, one incident. Then, just a month later, or a month or so later, April 1963, under bushes in Badgerdale Wood, there was a grim finding of the severed heads of 6 cows and a horse. And these heads had been mutilated, a grisly sort of finding, which I think resurrected suspicion that there was some sort of black magic element to it. Now, during the school holidays of 1979, this is quite a time later, 6 children 9-year-old Colby Pope, his two teenage sisters and 3 friends, saw a strange entity when they were having a daytime picnic in the wood. And first of all, one of them saw the entity, then the others saw it, and then it started coming towards them. As an adult in his 40s, Colby recalled that the creature was about 8 feet tall, was dark brown or black in colour, and had pointed ears and huge wings, and there was a yellow glow at its feet. Now, not surprisingly, the kids fled, and they fled the way they'd come. They crossed a field or two, and then went through an underpass under the M1 motorway, which was nearby. They climbed through a hole in a kind of gate, and then they were in civilization again, as it were. The entity, it seems, followed them, and they saw it come to the gate. It was making noises, but the hole was too small for it to get through, apparently. If this is the case, I presume that there wasn't a space for it to fly over the gate. Now, if you think of the effect on the children, the effect of this experience was to drive them away and scare them. And at first sight, it might seem cruel. It might seem that if this was a paranormal manifestation, it was evil. But one could say, well, let's say that this wood was used from time to time by rather nefarious people. Yes. Not the sort of people you'd want your kids to be running into in the wood. And it might use a sort of rather primitive, crude, but effective way of putting the kids off ever visiting the forest again by scaring the wits out of them.
Yeah. A bit like the stories that parents would tell the children to make sure that they came in after dark because, you might get chased by the bogeyman or whatever. I don't know, similar things.
It may be just coincidence, but there was you've probably heard of the Owl Man of Mornon, a case from Cornwall years ago, where there was a series of alleged sightings of a figure that looked a bit like a person, but also like an owl, and it was, most of the sightings seemed to have been in the vicinity of the church at Mornon, which was surrounded by woods. Now, interestingly, most of the witnesses were apparently girls. And in one instance, I remember the story was that the 2 girls of 14 were camping. I think they were camping alone near the church. Now, let's just assume, this is conjecture, let's just assume that there was some objective risk to them. Maybe there was someone prowling around or someone not too nice. Posing a risk to them. The Owlman manifestation may have been orchestrated as a deterrent to tear these girls away from being there alone.
But what have you drawn any conclusions or formed any opinions on what this intelligence that's potentially orchestrating these scenarios to actually for a deed of good, even though it's frightening? What is it that's doing it?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I'm just going to come on to the nature of the intelligence. I think what we'd have to say is that potentially the intelligence is very, very resourceful. I'm jumping ahead of myself a bit.
Well, don't jump ahead then, Peter, because you lose your structure if you know what.
Yes.
We'll just do one more question, and then, as long as I'm not throwing you.
Yes.
My granddad saw a white horse with a white lady riding it. He was a wagon driver. The police were well aware of the sightings because people would go into the station and report the sightings. Well, this might be, Lisa, this might be right up Peter's street, this, if you can fill him in with details afterwards. Leave us an email address, Peter, or somewhere people can contact you, because I don't think there's enough for us to go on there, is there?
No, I mean, it's interesting. There are parallels at Bluebell Hill in Kent, where in past years people would see various types of apparitional figure. That within a fortnight of each other, 2 men were driving on the road that goes through Bluebell Hill Village, and they encountered colliding apparitions. A female figure ran in front of the car or walked in front of the car. This case that's just been mentioned, if it had been the authorities have received reports before, that would fit with these recurrent cases. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So give us a direction, okay. Peter. Go on.
Right. Another one to embarrass you again. Not really embarrass you, but I'm joking. Is another one of yours. It's Forge Valley.
He's doing an assassination on me, isn't he? I'm only joking. Go on, Peter.
No, it's just that these cases are so interesting. This is in Truth Proof 4, pages 15 to 24. And again, I'll just read what I've got here for accuracy. Paul Sinclair discusses an experience that two brothers and a third man reportedly had one night in August 2018 while camping in the Forge Valley, a dark and foreboding wooded ravine not far from Scarborough. Although I don't know the precise location, the River Derwent flows through the ravine. On the night in question, one of the men, Dave, said that he felt they were being watched. Then a pair of huge eyes lit up in the darkness, which Dave saw first. Not long after, the men saw the entity to which the eyes belonged, a monstrous creature with huge shoulders, biceps, and forearms. It was leaning forward as if about to charge them. Although it didn't, instead, it reportedly stood watching them for hours. It had an exaggeratedly big, wolf-like head and large ears. 3 witnesses reportedly felt anger and hate coming from its eyes. And I've put in here in brackets that, as I shall explain shortly, that may have been an overly negative influence. Yeah. When it started getting light, the men packed up and left the area. By that time, the entity seemed to have gone, but Dave felt that they were still being watched, although that impression ceased when they reached a logging road. Along with 2 friends of his and 2 of the above-mentioned witnesses, Paul Sinclair visited the location in June 2020 and then again in August of that year. On the second occasion, the 5 of them spent the night there with various items of equipment. However, nothing overtly paranormal occurred during either of the visits. And in this case, my conjecture, and it is just conjecture, and I may be wrong, and Paul might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here. My thought is that maybe this location down at the bottom of this slightly isolated ravine was potentially dangerous in rainy conditions. If you imagine that there was a bit of heavy rain on the North York Moors, which rise to about 2,000 feet, it could be that the river is in spate conditions, and if you're right at the bottom of the valley camping, you could be caught out, and therefore it's a risky place to camp. They were wild camping, and this was this entity was materialized, or they were induced to hallucinate it in order to put them off, drive them away. It's interesting that although it was a very powerful looking creature, it didn't actually do them any physical harm.
It did them no harm, Peter.
That's right.
I'm not sure that obviously this is what you're thinking, but I'm not sure that they would have been in danger of their life if the river had have burst its banks. Seriously, because they could have got up the ravine. It's not a sheer rock face. But who knows?
You did say in the account that it was a difficult climb down.
Absolutely. We've been in it. I was in it a few weeks ago. And they had to come down on the backsides in places, and they'd have struggled to get out in the darkness.
Yeah, and if it's wet as well.
But I do believe that they thought there were a physical to it, because at one point they could hear it growling, and then they realised, because it was there for so long, that it was actually its lung capacity, it was its breathing. And I think out of all the people, all the cases that I've looked into, and I don't mean I disbelieve all the cases, but these are the most genuine people I've spoken to.
Yes.
Steve said in the end, and it were really good. I'd never even thought of it the way he described it. He said, in the end, I could see its eyes because they were glowing in the dark, and I daren't look at it. Every time I looked at it, it was like it put more fear. He says that fear was not mine. The fear was coming and being projected onto them. And that's how he felt. I'm only relaying the words that these guys told me. Do I think they had a real experience and not an hallucinatory one or some kind of psychotic episode, should we say? I think that they had a real experience. What it was, I don't know. But
Yes.
But the reports go back hundreds of years in that particular area. There's a
that entity has been seen before, has it? Or?
Well, we can't categorically say that entity, but literally 3 miles away, 4 miles away, there's a place called East Ayton. And in 1921, and I found this in an archive, a guy called Howard Brearley documented an old story back then of the Barguest of East Ayton that was in the Forge Valley and around the East Ayton area with flaming, glowing red to orange eyes that resembled to some people a bear, to other people a wolf, and this is how it was being described over 100 years ago. And his recital of these stories was old, so that no doubt there's more being lost in time. There's no way that Steve and Jim could have known that. I mean, I dug that out of an archive on microfilm, some really old papers. I'm not deliberately trying to bolster their story. I'm doing it because I've 100% faith myself that they did see something. I don't think it were something conjured in three men's minds. And I found
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
no.
that. I'm as far as the manifestation of the entity is concerned, I think I can't remember whether I used the word, but I used the word hallucination, but I also used the word for materialization. What I'm suggesting here is that the entity could have been physical at the time, they're transitorily physical. That I take the same attitude to some UFO reports as well. That the common assumption is that when people lose sight of a UFO, that it's kind of gone so fast, or it's disappeared behind cloud, or it's warped space, or something like that, in such a way that it's not possible for people to see it. But the implicit notion there is that the thing still physically exists. I'd suggest that some of these manifestations may be a bit like stage props. They're items for brief use. They're used at the moment. In other words, when the UFO disappears, it hasn't gone somewhere. It's not hiding somewhere. It hasn't slipped into another dimension or something like that. It's actually ceased to exist because it's not needed after that. It may maybe have a purpose at point A, point 1 or something on the clock. Once its purpose is finished, it's a bit like a theatrical performance. It ceases.
It's taken away, Do you know? And I can see a lot of value in what you're saying and what you're proposing. And I really can. The but for me is, or it's not even a but, and I've asked it already. If something is happening, a very definite is happening, what is responsible? I mean, there may be people screaming out in chat that we're not going to get to their reply to that. They might have better clue on this than me. Because if something's clearly responsible for producing all this mixed, varied phenomena, but what?
Well, I've suggested a higher intelligence, and I'll come on to the Skinwalker Ranch briefly in a minute. But what I'd suggest is that it's possible. It's possible, but I'm not convinced by this because some of these manifestations do seem hostile and destructive, but it's possible that in some cases paranormal phenomena are orchestrated by a higher intelligence for philosophical reasons. It's almost a kind of teaching of Zen lessons, that if we've got an over-materialistic worldview, we're kind of mechanistic and we're hubristic, we're proud in our kind of advancements and so on. These phenomena are manifested to show us that we haven't got a full grasp on things, that we're going wrong somehow. I mean, one thing that's well known is that there is quite an association between certain UFO phenomena and nuclear weapons sites. even to the point where weapons systems have been shut down when a UFO has been in the proximity. This has happened in the United States, for instance, and I think in the Soviet Union, as it then was. Now, this could be that the higher intelligence signaling that it's not terribly happy with with the risks we're taking. And again, I would say that if that's true, it may be that the UFO itself hasn't come from another planet. It hasn't come from somewhere else. It's a prop. It's been materialized at that point or people have been induced to hallucinate it for the purposes required. But the intelligence is highly resourceful. I mean, actually, some of these accounts are so bizarre that it's very hard to see. I mean, take this one for instance. There's one I'll skip actually. I think I was going to mention Pembury Forest in South Wales. I'll bypass that. Some years ago, I read a book by a Pennsylvania investigator called Stan Gordon, and it was called Silent Invasion, the UFO Bigfoot casebook, I think something like that. Okay. And it drew attention to a rash of UFO sightings and Bigfoot encounters that occurred in Pennsylvania between 1972 and 74. And most of the reports from the southwestern part of the state. Now, a particularly fascinating case came to the attention, to hit Gordon's attention in the autumn of 1973. And the following is a brief summary, and various details have been omitted. The setting was a rural location outside Uniontown in Fayette County. The events began with a UFO sighting involving a good number of witnesses, including a 22-year-old man whom Gordon refers to as Steve Palmer. That's a pseudonym. Apparently this man's name is now in the public domain, but I should have written it down. I did come across it a little while back, but it's I think a Polish name. But anyway, the man is dead, I think. So, anyway, he's known in Gordon's account as Steve Palmer. Along with two boys, he went to a field on his father's farm where the UFO seemed to have come down. They saw a huge white dome structure with a flattish base, although previously, when the object was in the sky, witnesses had seen it as spherical and red in color. Just in passing, I would say that the fact that UFOs can mutate in shape, color, and size could be seen as consistent with this notion that they're creations of the moment. They're not rigid physical structures. A whirring sound was coming from the UFO, and there was a smell in the air, somewhat like burning rubber. They spotted two creatures coming towards them, which they initially took to be bears. The hair-covered entities had glowing green eyes, no visible neck, and long arms. One of them appeared to be over 8 feet tall. The other was about 7 feet in height. Steve fired a tracer shot over them. When he fired a second such shot towards them, the larger creature reached up as if to grab the projectile, at which point the UFO suddenly vanished, leaving a ring of luminosity where it had been. The whirring sound also ceased. The creatures turned and headed towards a wooded area. And then, typical American style, Steve fired 3 live shots at them.
All right.
But neither showed any sign of having been harmed.
So it's almost holographic, a projection that they've been shown.
It sounds something like that, doesn't it? Later, Steve returned to the field with an officer from the state police. The luminous ring could still be seen. There was another Bigfoot encounter, although from the description in Gordon's book, it seems that it may have entailed only one creature. When Gordon and his colleagues arrived on the scene later that night, there were further odd occurrences. For example, Steve displayed strange behavior. One of Gordon's colleagues felt as if he were going to faint and the air seemed to become permeated with a very strong, sickening smell. That night appeared to mark a turning point for Steve, now deceased, since he went on to have further paranormal experiences over the years. So this is a bizarre case. I mean, this book has other cases that are fascinating. I'd recommend it. And I think it's important for people to appreciate that there is a massive overlap between these things. You get people who seem to want to keep paranormal phenomena in tight little boxes.
Full investigation over all the genres of the unexplained.
Yeah.
They want to just keep it they pigeonhole it, and they don't want anything to infiltrate it from another type of what they perceive as another type of phenomena. And to me, it's spoiling things, and they're missing a part of the research, really. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you, absolutely. A woman who wrote a review of my book on paranormal experiences in woods and forests, she said that she seemed to like the book, but for her, there was a little too much UFOing going on.
Yeah.
So, because I mentioned, the book's by no means all about UFO cases, but there is some UFO content, but people don't like it. You know, they like ghosts.
Yeah. Some people do, Peter. Yeah.
M.R. James ghosts, that sort of thing.
But before you move on, Peter, because we haven't done this, where can people? Do I have an email address where if they want to pass some information on to you? Is there anywhere they can get your books?
Yeah, I can give you an email address. Yes.
And do it now, is it an email address that you want to share, or do you want to give it to me in case anybody contacts?
It's the one you've got.
Okay. Well, I haven't got that in my head now. What I'm saying is, people in the chat, we've got nearly 400 people here. Somebody might want to contact you at some stage. Do you want them to contact me to get in touch with you?
No, they can contact me direct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Peter.McCue. That's MCCUE, all lowercase letters, at virginmedia.com.
Excellent. And what about the books? Where do people get hold of your books?
The easiest place to get them is on Amazon.
And just run through titles for us then, please. You're not a good salesman, Peter. You're not selling these books.
I'll tell you what it is. I don't like the excessive bragging.
But we haven't done. We haven't done.
Hold on.
We've run over an hour and a half. It's only fair.
You get in this field. I mean, you know what it's like. People are constantly, they'll post to Facebook saying that I'm so proud an article of mine has just appeared in this magazine. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I'd be embarrassed. And I am a bit coy about that sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, but I don't think there's any harm in this talking about what you've produced, because they're good books.
No. I agree with you. But you know what it's like. I'm not going to name any names, but it's incredible the amount of boasting. And
well, I realise there's a lot of podcasts, and every 15 minutes they're pushing the books, and I usually forget about mine. But I do say it, and I'll just briefly say it now. Then anybody wanting my books, the Truth Proof books, Amazon, same as Peter's avenue of. If you want to search there, you can get the Kindle versions, or you can buy them on eBay or truthproof.uk. Likewise, the Wolflands documentary, truthproof.uk or Amazon Prime. So I'll end that one there, and if you've done with that, we'll carry on.
Okay, so I'll turn now to the Skinwalker Ranch. This is a case that quite a few of you will know about. It's received a lot of publicity because there have been some television programs screened in this country and in the States and elsewhere, I presume. This is a ranch it's a colloquial name for a ranch in northeast Utah in the western United States. And it's in an area known as the Uinta Basin, which has a history of UFO sightings and other anomalies, I believe. And the ranch dates back to, I'm not quite sure of when it was built, but it's been there for decades. And the events that I'm going to mention, which some of you will know about anyway, can be sort of slotted into different periods. Now, the first period I'll say is the pre-Sherman period. And by Sherman, I'm referring to a man called Terry Sherman, who with his wife were there from 1994 to 1996. Now, the pre-Sherman period is a bit problematic because there are different versions of what went on. It would get into too much detail for me to go into it now, but the pre-Sherman period is a bit difficult to evaluate because, as I say, different versions of what went on. This man Sherman and his wife, and they had 2 kids, a son and a daughter. They lived there for under 2 years between 1994 and 1996, I think it was. And they experienced a lot of bizarre phenomena, allegedly encountering strange animals, UFO sightings, poltergeist or haunt type manifestations at the ranch. For instance, Mrs. Sherman would maybe come in with some provisions or something and put them down and empty them from the bags, and then they would find them back in the bags again, something like that. Kind of sort of thing that has happened at the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Centre as well. The Shermans, I think they were finding it. They were. Oh, by the way, there were cattle mutilations and animal deaths. So it wasn't good for business. It wasn't good for the nerves and so on. And the Shermans sold up to a Robert Bigelow, who is a well-known entrepreneur from Las Vegas, property and aerospace tycoon, who has an interest in anomalous phenomena. He's particularly interested in the question of survival after death and also UFO phenomena. And he was financing for some years an organization called NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, which employed scientists and it had an advisory board. And they acquired or Bigelow, I think it was, who was the actual literal owner. He owned the property for quite a few years, from 1996 to 2016. Now, the Bigelow, during Bigelow's time in ownership, he was a bit coy, I think, about telling people exactly what was going on. But a book was published some years ago by one of the investigators, Colm Kelleher, and a journalist called Knapp. This book was called Hunt for the Skinwalker, and Bruce Knapp, I think it was. And the Hunt for the Skinwalker, and it detailed various phenomena that had occurred of the type I've already mentioned. A little bit of controversy about it. I was in touch few years ago with a Dr. Frank Salisbury, who was a botanist by professional background, but he was interested in the local UFO phenomena, had written a book called The Utah UFO Display, published previously, and he brought out a new version, and this was some years ago. And in the new version, there's a chapter on the Skinwalker Ranch, and he reports that he did speak to Terry Sherman on the phone, had some lengthy conversations with him, I think. And according to Sherman, some of the things, Sherman didn't seem to agree or endorse some of the things in the book. So again, with these problems, you get the evidence.
I see. I think it was Jim Sherman, weren't it, Peter? Jim Sherman, I think.
Terry Sherman.
Was it Terry? I thought it was Jim, because I know it's George Knapp as well.
George Knapp, sorry, George Knapp.
Yeah.
I said Bruce Knapp. No, I said it's George Knapp. Yeah. That's why I make notes. Otherwise, it's
no, not a problem. So there were discrepancies. What was in the book with what Sherman thought? Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that, this is a bit up in the air, but there was an experience reported in the book, early in the book, where the family encountered a very large wolf-like creature, which then attacked one of their cattle, and then Terry Sherman, shot the creature with several bullets, and it just sort of sauntered away in a nonchalant way. And he and his son followed its tracks, but then they just sort of vanished into nothing, as if it had sort of dematerialized. This was in the book.
Yeah, and there weren't the other element to that. I haven't read the book, where it actually blew some flesh off it, and the flesh
That's right.
disintegrated or just didn't last long at all in the atmosphere, did it?
I don't know about the disintegration aspect. I've read the book. I can't remember reading that particular item, but I do know that a piece of flesh apparently came off it. But anyway, in talking to Terry Sherman on I think I'm right in saying this, that Frank Salisbury was told by Sherman that was just hearsay. Now that doesn't really discount it, but it doesn't actually endorse it. It's a bit ambiguous.
It's better to have first-hand accounts, isn't it, than hearsay? That to me, it's a little bit vague. That isn't it? Yeah, I didn't know that.
It's as if casting it out on it. But anyway, so there were these discrepancies. The phenomena during the NIDS investigation, they did record some phenomena instrumentally, but not that many. I think they had more experiences, though, that weren't maybe instrumentally recorded. One of the more recent revelations are that quite a lot of contagion occurred. It's paranormal contagion. And this is where people come to a property or a site where things are going on, and then they find themselves taking it home with them, taking something home with them. I did a bit of research, actually,
You just carry on, Peter, because I'm going to have to open the door. It's warm in here. Just, I'll be back. 1 second.
Okay. I did a bit of research 2 or 3 years ago, contacting various investigators. I was looking into how common contagion is. My impression from rubbing shoulders with various investigators over the years is it's not very common. And that was more or less the finding that I got from
when you call it contagion, great word, probably very fitting for it. What do you think's happening then? Do you think, because I've got my own views on this, do you think that the intelligence, the phenomena is actually around the person and traveling back with them? Because my thoughts on it are that we only say we've had an experience, or we've been in an area where there's been a lot of activity of strange occurrences, and you go home and you concentrate on it and you think about it, and I think it's just a thought process away. I know you're talking about the hitchhiker effect and contagion, but I think that we only have to think about these things. I don't think time and space has any effect on this unknown other. Myself, you're not forced to agree, I realise.
Right. I'm not sure. Darren Ritson, in a recent book, or fairly recent book, which is a sort of sequel, or one of more than one sequel to his book on the South Shields poltergeist case. He and a colleague called Mike Hallowell, they speculated that there could be two types of contagion: active and passive. With active contagion, the intelligence, if you like, behind the phenomena deliberately infects. I'll just use that metaphor. The target. You go to the Skinwalker Ranch. You come home. A poltergeist phenomenon occur, say, in your home, and that could be deliberate. You're being deliberately targeted. The other type of contagion, passive contagion, is more like catching a cold. You know, you go to Skinwalker Ranch. It's people, the cold virus is there, and you pick it up passively. It's not intentional. As for purpose, if there is an intelligence that's responsible for contagion, there could be motives such as punitive motive. You know, it could be that basically the intelligence doesn't want people to come to the place, and it's going to punish people for coming there, and it's going to make an example of people who do go there. That could be a possibility. It could be a demonstration of its potency. You know, that
this is what I'm capable of.
This is what I'm capable of. Yes, it's
Have you,
But
have you,
there's a difference, though, between the contagion that's been reported by Ritson in connection with the South Shields case and maybe some others, and Skinwalker Ranch. And the difference seems to be that the contagion associated with the Skinwalker Ranch has been much worse. I mean, Ritson and Halliwell say that the contagion that they've kind of run into, it seems to ripple out and dilute as it trickles along through people. And whereas some of the things that have gone on at the Skinwalker Ranch are allegedly been quite serious. I mean, there was one woman, for instance, I've alluded to it, by poltergeist phenomena developed in her hitherto quiet home and was still going on years later. Years. We're not talking about 2 months or something like that. So it's quite a serious matter, really.
have you formed any opinions, Peter, why certain locations are really rich in reports and the phenomena?
I've non-specific thoughts that if there could be certain physical factors, geomagnetic influences, a proneness to earth lights and all that sort of thing. There could be the presence of certain people. I've often, I mean, this is an obvious point, really, but I think whether people experience paranormal phenomena or not is partly if paranormal phenomena related to places, is partly related to them as people, and partly the place. So you've got a place-person interaction. And I think these interactions could be quite complicated. I'll give you a hypothetical example. If you imagine that we all have a potential, we can all be given a score for potential to generate paranormal phenomena. That is, as individual persons, we can generate. And the score can, let's say the score can go from 0 to 10 for a person, and a place can also have a score in its own right, 0 to 10. Let's just say, to keep things simple, that we can add the scores from both the person and the place. So if you live in a house that's very high on the score, phenomena might occur there irrespective of whether you're sensitive or not. If the house doesn't have such a high score, or it has a very low score, you'll have to have quite a high score to
enhance
trigger it off. And this could result in strange things happening and people drawing the wrong conclusions. Imagine, for example, you've got a woman called Judy, and Judy scores just below the level required for phenomena to occur. And then her cousin from the United States comes to visit for a month, and she has a smaller score, a score of 2. But when she arrives, the combined score is now over the limit, and so phenomena occur. And then when Kate leaves, the phenomena cease because the score has dropped below the threshold. Now, people at the local parapsychology department, they may say, oh yes, well, here we have a woman, Kate, who visits, phenomena break out, Kate leaves, phenomena stop. Therefore, wrong conclusion, Kate is the primary focus. And in fact, it's Judy who's the primary focus.
It kind of makes sense. And you look at it another way, that you could get somebody living bog standard house, live there 25 years, nothing's ever happened. If they fall below that score, new family move in, a higher percentage of potential for paranormal activity to happen within their presence, combined with the house, then things happen.
That's right.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I was going to say, do we? That were going to be one of my questions. Do we, or certain people or groups of people, influence and enhance the phenomena? But I think we've already got to that one, haven't we? You've already answered it.
Yeah. What may happen also is there might be a combined effect. If you've got something like the Skinwalker Ranch and you've already got people there who are a bit sensitive psychically, and then you bring in some more people, it might kind of tip the balance a bit. Another problem with the Skinwalker Ranch, though, I have is there are just little hints now and again of some kind of involvement by the US military. I mean, I don't know, if, assuming that it's not invented, and in this series, the last one I saw anyway, the Curse of the Skinwalker Ranch, which is, I think, a title given in Britain to a series that's known as the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch or something in the States. But anyway, there are reports of occasionally military aircraft, American military aircraft, seen flying in the area. And in Hunt for the Skinwalker, there was, I think it was mentioned there, just in passing, of, you know, military people being seen in the area. So whether the US military has some kind of involvement, it's very hard to know, because there are so many layers of conspiracy theory, aren't there, about the
and not only that, we know that there's been reports for decades about the strangeness of the location, but when you've got a TV series, something for television, it's got to be entertaining as well. I'm not saying that the things are fabricated, but it's got to be entertainment, hasn't it, as well? And if you're going to do 6 or 7 series, I don't watch them, so I don't know how many series are in one of these blocks that they put out. I don't even know correct terminology. However, just walking about the ranch or moving about on 4-wheelers ain't going to entertain people, is it? There's got to be some drama created, hasn't there?
What they've done, I mean, this is under the ownership of Brandon Fugel, the team that's there now, and it's not the same one that when Bigelow was in charge, but they've thrown an awful lot of
experimental,
you know, and it must be costing Fugel a fortune. You know, flying 100 drones or something like that, and then having all the electronic monitoring and all sorts of laboratory tests and so on.
I'm aware that you've got the structure of what you want to talk about tonight, but I know there's going to be loads of questions. Can we get through a few?
Yes,
it doesn't matter if they're just yeses and nos. It's just we'll just do a few questions. Well, seriously, you know.
No.
So let's have a look. So this happened Saturday afternoon, 35 years ago. It was hot weather. My husband and I heard a crash outside. An old motorbike. I'm tipping it's Anne. It turned out to be a neighbour 30 years before that hit a telegraph pole on his granddad's bike, I'm assuming. So almost like, what's that? What would you call that if that's the case? Is it some kind of time slip?
Well, some people would call it a replay, wouldn't they? There is a very popular theory about ghostly experiences called, it's popularly known as the stone tape theory, which isn't a very scientific term, but that's based on a Nigel Neal science fiction play in about 1972 or something like that, where it was suggested that the building and the walls of rocks or something, stones of the building
absorb the.
Yeah, but I don't know that there's much evidence for it, to be honest.
No.
But that case, if the crash of the bike, where there was a crash, I suppose. I mean, I'm not dismissing the account, but I suppose it's possible that the noise was caused by something else, and it was coincidental. That, you know, it happened just to be at the same spot. It was where there was a motorbike crash.
No, that's fine. We'll move on. Let's do another one. North Sea writes, is it possible that our consciousness is tampered with? Why is it that more persons on the same moment and in the same place see or experience different things? I'll just put my 2 pence in and then we'll see what Peter thinks. I think it's probably because we all have a different idea of what the phenomena is, what we want from the phenomena. We might not consciously think about it in the words that I've just used, but I think that might be the case in some instances.
Right. There is a theory put forward by a British psychical researcher called G.N.M. Tyrrell. In these old days, people used these initials, didn't they? G.N.M. They didn't call it Jerry.
I only knew Fly Fishing by J.M. Hartley. I didn't know any others. That advert that used to be on TV. But
yeah. This man was George Tyrrell, I think, actually. But his idea was that he believed that paranormal apparitions tended to be hallucinations, albeit collective hallucinations. And his theory about the reason why ghostly experiences would be collective, where the target might be you, but you happen to be with other people, and when the phantom appears, there are witnesses, and they see the thing as well, or maybe see the thing as well. And the reason he suggested was that the perceptual process, which occurs unconsciously, tries to emulate normal perception as much as possible. So if you were in the room and suddenly your cousin appeared in front of you, just say around the time that your cousin is killed, the apparition, and then someone else sees it who isn't related to you, the reason why that other person may see it is that if it were a real person you were seeing, that person who's present would see it. Therefore, the perceptual process sort of mimics what normally happens. But the questioner really asked something different, saying, well, why are these experiences different? What one could say is that if the process of generating apparitions or paranormal experiences may be a rather imperfect thing at any given time. And for instance, if two out of three people hear a ghostly sound and the third person hears nothing, it could just be that the third person doesn't have the sensitivity or the potential to have those sorts of maybe hallucinatory experiences or paranormal hallucinatory experiences. And I'd emphasize here that when using the word hallucination, it's not a dismissive term. It's not saying that something is imaginary or it doesn't exist. The collective paranormal experiences could be hallucinatory, and it's still paranormal. Why are two or more people seeing the same thing, which isn't real? And that could be that something is working on their mind. But the reason that they don't all see it is that they don't have the basic sense. We don't all have the same level of sensitivity.
Okay, thank you. We've got another one. Just tell me if you're fed up of questions, but I'll get punished if I don't read these questions. What about dreaming an event before it happens? My brother has witness to his dream about a train crash. A very detailed dream with specific descriptions of the victim dreamed hours before it happened.
Well, I have to say that from the accounts I've read, it does seem quite a credible proposition that some dreams are precognitive. They do tap into the future. That raises the question: does that future already exist? And if so, can we change it? Or is there a sort of a ghost future, a malleable, an alterable future ahead? Another possibility is that when we have precognitive experiences, we seem to see things in advance or dream things in advance. It's because we're tapping into a higher mind that knows a lot more of what's going on at the present. And if you knew a lot more about what's going on in the present than we do, you as a higher intelligence, you would probably be able to predict with much greater accuracy what's going to happen in the future. In other words, it may be the future doesn't actually really exist, but when your brother or relative or you have a dream that comes true and is surprisingly so and seems to be precognitive, it's because you've actually tapped into this higher intelligence.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. This is not a question we're going to answer. I'm just putting it up out of decency because I must have missed the first half. 30 years ago, he was going to play cricket, so I'm tipping there was something else, Neil. So apologies, it weren't ignored deliberately. So let's have a look at Dave Barker's question now. Do you think some spirits are fully conscious, sentient spirits capable of awareness and interaction, Peter?
Don't know whether Dave is referring to human spirits or spirits, other types of spirit. Okay.
And I'm conscious that if there's anything else you want to touch on, because we've got 20 minutes left. Otherwise, I'm going to just keep looking for these questions because we do have a few more. Are you okay still?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay. Right, 2467. I seem to be more in tune or receptive to thoughts that come true as the new moon grows to a full moon. Does anyone else get this? No lottery numbers, sadly. Well, if I'll be your best friend if you can do lottery numbers 2467. But is there any correlation to paranormal events or anything regarding the cycles of the moon?
I think there has been research on it, but I'm not au fait with it. I don't study all the aspects of the paranormal in depth.
That's good enough. Let's have a look at this then. Greg, 4473. My dad ran into a misty figure in a dip in the road on the Fenwick Moors in the 1970s. It was night time and it freaked him out that much. He phoned the cops when he got home. So these are kind of stories that you've written about, Peter, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything here? Are you looking for material for another book?
Not particularly. I haven't got a new book in mind just at the moment. But
okay.
Yeah.
This is kind of stuff that I know that you're interested in, but that's.
Oh yes. I'm always interested in receiving accounts of strange experiences. Yes.
Right. So this is Ian Linney for Peter. Apologies if already asked. Have you had any sightings or experiences yourself? Good question, Ian. Because I've not asked you that, have I?
No. I don't know. That's the reason I say that is that I've had some odd experiences, but it's hard to know whether they were paranormal or not. I'll give you one example, or two examples actually. I was working for a while in a dodgy part of Glasgow. It's the sort of place where you have to be careful where you park the car, or you might find it broken into. And one day I parked it on a street which I knew was a little bit dodgy, and as I left the building, I suddenly had an uncomfortable feeling. And sure enough, my car had been broken into. Now, I don't know whether that was a sort of ESP experience or whether it was just a kind of unconscious deduction. I've parked my car on such and such a street. This is a dodgy area. There are lots of heroin addicts here who smash the window and take the radio or something. So therefore, there's a risk of that having happened. So it could have been that. The other experience was some years ago. I was on a holiday in the United States. It was a tour of national parks, and at one point we were in Utah. We spent about 2 or 3 nights in Salt Lake City, and we were accommodated in a hotel, which I wasn't very comfortable there because it was near an area where down and outs would hang out, and you'd hear them kind of shouting and that sort of thing quite late into the night. And there was a state liquor store there, which I think it's generally hard to get booze, publicly in Utah, but this place people could buy alcohol, and so I was a bit sort of uncomfortable in the hotel. And but anyway, on the last night, I went to bed, and at about 1 o'clock there was very loud footsteps walking across the floor above me, and it was very loud. It was the sort of thing that you would expect with workmen doing work there or something, but that seemed unlikely at that time of night. The other possibility was that it was someone who was actually psychotic or unwell in some way, or walking up and down in an extremely agitated state loudly, or deliberately making a noise for some reason. I wasn't sure. The other possibility, of course, is that it was a sort of haunt-type manifestation. I wish I'd actually made more inquiries at the time. I did sort of light-heartedly say something about it to the desk person, as I left, but I didn't get any kind of feedback.
No feedback. Can I just take you back to your car braking? When and you went through all the possibilities, but when you had this thought, this ominous feeling that you didn't foresee a braking, but you just got this odd feeling that you can't quite put your finger on.
As I recall, yes.
So when you actually found that the car had been broken into or damage had been done to the car, at that moment, did you connect that feeling and those thoughts, and you think, I've just had some kind of, I don't know, premonition, some paranormal event has taken place, and then did it dissipate after time due to your training and your qualification, should I say?
I think from the outset, really, I knew that it wasn't strong evidence because,
okay,
as I say, that street was a bad area for and I was actually foolish because the radio I had at the time was retractable. You could actually just pull it out of the.
Took it out,
and I should have put it in the boot or taken it into the clinic with me where I was working. But to leave it in the car, I mean, these thieves are probably much more expert at recognizing what sort of radio it is and so on than I am. So, so therefore, when it was stolen, I knew I couldn't disentangle the two possibilities.
No.
You know?
Okay,
and it could be dismissed easily as just guesswork. You know,
yeah, and it could be that subconsciously, every time you parked it there, you were thinking this, but it didn't come to highlighted in your mind until you actually saw it broken into.
Yes, I didn't generally, I didn't often park there. That was the other thing. I usually park somewhere. I don't know why I didn't park it. Maybe the car park where I would have parked it.
We've got a question. 368. Peter, do you think 3 a.m. is the most times people see ghosts? I saw an old woman or the old woman that I saw disappear was at 3:30 a.m. Have you found in research there's a time period when these things happen?
I think popularly it's believed that sort of time is the kind of witching hour or something like that. But I doubt statistically whether that's the most common time to see an apparition, partly because most people at that time will probably be in bed. They won't be, they won't be in a position to see a phantom. Unless it's in a dream or something like that, or it's, I mean, most. So imagine if you did a statistical study and you said, "Have you ever seen an apparition or a ghost or something like that?" And you got, say, 100 people who said yes, and then you plotted the time. I think you'd probably find that a lot of it would be at other times, and some of it might be in daylight as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'll put this question up. Darren's asked this. I think we've had a comment from Darren on channel earlier, so I do remember this. Hi Peter, where do you stand on ghost hunting tech, for example, spirit boxes, EVP recording, REM pods? I've never used them until recently, and somebody's come out and used a few of these pieces of equipment, and I'm green to it. But I'm also open to seeing what happens. What's your thoughts?
Two thoughts really. One is that I think there's a bit of misunderstanding about some of these bits of equipment. I mean, people talk about EMF meters, and yet when people are reporting the readings, I think they're reporting magnetic field readings rather than electric field readings. I think magnetic fields have more influence on experiences than maybe electric fields. But the other thing is, I think with some people who call themselves ghost hunters, they perhaps get things around the wrong way. If you go into a property where strange phenomena are reported and you use one of these meters and you do get a high reading, the very spiritualistic ghost hunter might say that's the spirit manifesting, whereas perhaps the more scientific investigator would say, well, maybe there is a magnetic field here which is unusual or higher than average, and maybe the magnetic field itself is affecting the people, causing unpleasant or strange feelings, which they're then attributing to the ghost. So I think we've got to be careful what attributions we make. Even the expression spirit box, I mean, I don't think it's justified. I don't think there's any evidence that you're literally contacting. I think it's basically a magnetometer, isn't it? A spirit box.
Yeah, and you don't know what to make of them either, because they're throwing out random words, some of these bits of tech, aren't they? And you're thinking to yourself, we could apply that word to something. We can make it fit anything we want, can't we, in a way?
Yeah.
It's a bit like going to see a spiritualist or standing in a spiritualist church and they throw out a name. I'm looking for somebody called John, and there'll be somebody in there who's got an uncle or a friend called John. I'm not having a go at spiritualists. I've got some good friends who sort of work in those circles, should we say, but it's all in air for me. I don't know. So I guess Darren's saying, do you think, well, I'm saying, do you think there's a place for this equipment?
There may be a place. I mean, if, for instance, there are case reports which suggest that abnormal experiences may be related to environmental factors, such as electric fields or magnetic fields, or given that there is some evidence of that, I think it's worth maybe, if I can remember a case years ago that I read. I think it was by I don't know, it was by Persinger or someone like that who reported this, but it was a case of a woman or a girl who was having strange experiences, but she was sleeping very near a clock, and it had I think it was generating quite a strong magnetic pulse or something, and when that clock was moved away, the symptoms,
the activity
stopped.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing in this connection about environmental factors is, I don't know whether some of you will be aware of the South Shields poltergeist case of some years ago, but the two investigators, principal investigators at the time, were Mike Hallowell and Darren Ritson, and a colleague of theirs suggested that the people in the house afflicted by the poltergeist phenomena, this couple, I think, were in the habit of leaving lots of electrical items on standby at night. And the colleagues of Ritson and Hallowell suggested that they be advised to switch off all these items. And they did that, and then the phenomena stopped. Now, that does suggest that whether the phenomena were paranormal to a degree or not, and I think from the description of them, they probably were, it may be that unusual electrical environment,
had an influence,
and so on, could contribute. And if that's the case, if equipment is used intelligently and not in a kind of too spiritualistic way, just we've got an electric field, magnetic field here, there's a spirit bed in the corner. If it's done more scientifically, there may be a use for that kind of equipment.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. And we were in Danes, me and a guy called James Coppett, who uses a lot of this kind of equipment. We were in Danesdyke last week, and he all of these things that Darren's mentioned, he had. So it may have been you that commented, Darren. It may have not been. If it were you that commented, if it wasn't you, then I apologise. If it were you, if you're going to comment again, at least be decent with your comment, and then you'll get a decent response. So James at one point had one of those cat balls. You know what I mean? The little balls that light up with motion. He placed it in the dike, not in the water, but in the area of the dike. I've got footage because I'm going to do a little bit more just to show what he did. He's jumping about around it. 15 stone, stamping, and I don't mean 4 foot away, right next to it. No movement, nothing happening. He bent down, he blew on it, nothing happened. He touched it, it lit up. We walk away from it, and it doesn't activate every 30 seconds, or it's not electrically activated, as in with some kind of stimulus that he could hold in his hand. There's just all it is a ball that senses motion. And he said, what he actually said was, Paul, I've just seen a ball of mist. And as he said it, I looked round, and the cat ball had lit up. We never said that. I put 1 minute 18 seconds up on the internet the other day to show this, because it did take me by surprise. I asked it to do it again. Literally 20 feet away, put the camera on James, he's the same distance. It did it again. There's no wind. It did it twice for us. I must admit, I asked it 5 times, but the first 2, it did it. But after that, there was nothing. Is it coincidence? Maybe. Is there some other factor? Is there an insect underneath it? Possibly. Do you know what? I'm open to all of that, but I did find it quite fascinating. that it did it. The conjunction with me asking it if it would do it. What's your thoughts on something like that? Do you think there's plausible explanations? There possibly is.
Possibly. This kind of thing where it works 2 or 3 times and it stops.
Yeah.
Again, from a paranormal point of view, one could see that as a tricksterish thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The phenomena are kind of almost designed to tease you, to not give you complete satisfaction. It's yeah. I mean, going back to the Skinwalker case. I mean, as some of you know who have watched these programs, allegedly at the Skinwalker Ranch, equipment failure is, and in other locations, is quite well known. You know, people will find that their recording instruments don't work and that kind of thing, or they take a photograph and the camera seems to fail where it works elsewhere, which gives you the impression that maybe, you know, among the motivations of whatever it is we're dealing with, there's a perverse element to. Yeah. I have to say, you know, you were asking me earlier about what my understanding of the higher intelligence is. I'm actually quite pessimistic that we'll ever know. I suspect that I'll be in my box without knowing.
Yeah, I've said much the same. I've said much the same. And I think there's far more sharper brains than mine looked into this before, and they'd probably come to the same conclusion. You know? Yes. Let's do one more question, Peter. We've wound 2 hours up here, Peter. I think I've got about literally 30 questions for you tonight, and we've not touched on them, have we? Which doesn't matter. Right, let's have a look. I've not read this prior either. Paul, does Peter believe when we die we all return to dust, just being energy? Also, has he any views on consciousness that could entangle us all and connect us to the universe?
I'm open-minded about this, but the very reality, or that seems to be the evident reality of paranormal phenomena, extrasensory perception, and other aspects, does suggest that we are more than just mechanistic, you know, particles banging into each other, or electrical impulses firing at random, or something like that. So yes, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of afterlife, but whether it's knowable, I don't know. In a sense, I'm literally an agnostic, because agnostic means you can't know. I mean, I'm not sure that we can't know, but maybe we won't get to know. Whereas an atheist, for instance, in relation to God, is saying there isn't a God. But I'm doubtful whether we'll. These things are so complicated, I think, and so hard to grasp, and so variable and tricksterish that.
Has your views on what the phenomena is changed from point A to where you are now?
The biggest description I could put to this is to say, I just don't know. I mean, I feel like a failure saying that.
No, I find myself saying I don't know all the time, Peter. I really do, because I don't. There's so many experts.
I think it's foolish, though, for people to say the opposite and say it's all. I mean, some of the kind of stuff I hear on television with skeptics, you know, kind of scraping the barrel to try to dismiss people's experiences.
But yes, sometimes the explanations used to dismiss them are more ridiculous than the actual exciting. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. Have we time for one more question? Let's just go down. We're just about there, people. And I know Peter's given us 2 hours of his time, but I just want to. I haven't read it, so I hope it's okay. Oh, she disappeared when she turned to look back. She was going nowhere. So this is another one that we've not got the full context of what it is. So apologies, guys. And I think we're just light dazzles. Let's just do this, then we'll wind it up. Hello, Peter. What are your thoughts on the time slip phenomena that is reputed to occur on Bold Street in Liverpool? You may not have any thoughts on it.
Well, I've already covered it to some extent. I think that when people have these experiences, it may be more to do with inserted memories rather than literally going back in time. I mean, I don't even know that can really make sense going back in time. And if I were following someone down Bold Street and then they had a time slip and saw themselves back in 1963, would I see them suddenly flash out of existence? Or would I actually see them walking along slightly distracted? And then afterwards, they don't remember that they were still in Bold Street, but they thought they were in somewhere else, or an older version of Bold Street. I'm not even sure. To be honest, I haven't studied that many accounts of Bold Street to know how well authenticated cases are. I'm told that quite a lot of cases have been publicised by a local author, but I don't know whether he's provided, chapter and verse. I'm not sure about it. So
it's interesting, and it's just sort of made me think of something. I got a report off a police officer. I'm not going to go into detail about it because I'm not sure. Bold Street, I'm sure it was Bold Street, where they'd been sat doing their notes before they ended their shift, writing up the events of the night, and they saw a man pass them, walk into a disused cinema, the building. The recess, as it were. They saw him, then they took note of him because he was very smartly dressed, and he turned and went into this doorway. And this is morning, very early morning, and as they started the car, they just looked that way, and it were all boarded up. And I'm sure that was Bold Street. I'm going to have to look at that, Peter. So yes. That's interesting. So, Peter, 2 hours, we've just about covered everything. And one last thing from myself, I'd just like to say, if you sat in chat still, you've stayed with us this long, give us a like and subscribe, please, because, we would appreciate it. And have you got any final thoughts or words, Peter?
No, I hope I haven't disappointed anyone by not answering the questions, but...
No, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. I find myself saying it all the time. And most of these things that I'm asked, I really don't know. So, everyone in chat, thanks for supporting us. Enjoyed speaking with Peter, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to him share his thoughts on the phenomena, and we'll say good night. Thank you. Good night, Peter.
Good night.
Is this an adventure or what? We don't need unexplained phenomena. I hope you guys are enjoying this journey we're taking you on. I know you come expecting to hear about big cats, cryptids, UFOs. We will touch on some of that, but I think it's worth sharing some of this with you, don't you? There's only 2 living souls up here today.
Because I can see it in my mind, I can see it in my head what I saw, but I can't describe.
Our eyes was closed, like a brightish light in my face, and I just felt paralysed.
Someone said there's something out there, so we had a look. It looked like a walnut. That's the only way I can describe it.
It was like it had loads of tiny little windows all over it, and it had lights in those windows, but not a light that illuminates.
Anyway, we were ushered into this lounge. This fella come in, he said, whatever you saw was a weather effect.
And everything is deathly silent. There's no sea, there's no wind, there's no night noise, because there's foxes all over here. There's nothing.